Hello YouTube, this is my video on this bed I made for me and my wife, and this is the first part of a multi-part series on it that just talks about the platform part. So my wife wanted us to have a different bed because the one I made last time, maybe 10 years ago, maybe more than that, she got tired of, I guess, and so she decided that she wanted a new bed. And when we moved to a new house, she decided that was the best time. So even though I didn't have a bed at that time, I just threw the mattress on the floor. We got a new mattress, and we've been essentially sleeping on the floor for 2 years waiting for me to finish this. So here are the design goals for this bed. Obviously the wife's goals are the most important because she's the one that wants it, but the first, of course, is she wants it to look nice, and her other requirement was that she wanted drawers under the bed. So I took that and I decided to come up with my own design goals. And the first one, of course, is I wanted to make her happy. And then I really didn't want to make a bed that had 1,000 little bolts that you would take apart, and then you had all these little pieces that you would transport. I wanted it to break down into as few pieces as possible. 4 would be the ideal. I didn't really get there. I think I got 5 or so. Anyways, and the other one is that maybe a couple years ago I tried making this wardrobe, 2 wardrobes, one for me and one for her in her bedroom. And then when we moved, because I built it in the bedroom, I built it too big and I couldn't get it out in one piece. And so what I had to do was essentially completely disassemble it, which it wasn't designed for. And so I essentially broke it. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't do that same problem again. When you design furniture, make sure that you can carry it into rooms. The other one is because you want to carry it into rooms, I wanted to make it as light as I could. And then I also wanted to use as much scrap wood as possible, especially since, like I said, I made a wardrobe and I had all the scrap wood from that. So I wanted to use that up, especially the drawer slides and the drawers and stuff. I also, just on top of that, I was thinking about a headboard that had some electrical amenities like something to charge your cell phone, and also a his and her type reading lamps that were LED. And I also wanted, watching all the YouTube woodworkers, I wanted to try some new techniques, especially laminating a whole bunch of pieces of wood together. So after I made this list, I went to SolidWorks and I designed, I came up with this design for the bottom, the base with the drawers. And you can see that I didn't draw out the drawers, but the idea is that there's 2 halves. Each half does not break down. So if you look at this picture in the upper left, that's a half, and so and of course there's going to be a board on top, and though that makes one piece that doesn't break down. It's all glued together, and there's no screws. There's just nails, or brad nails. So that doesn't break down, but then you put them together. So there would be hardware to put them together, but that's it. But anyways, so there's 2 big pieces that form the platform, and each one of those has to fit through a door and carry. So you can see that there's a lot of cutout, trying to make it as light as possible. Once I had my design down, I started making these sketches to just kind of keep so I knew what the dimensions were. And I didn't really make a lot of these. I made 2 big ones just to remember the really important dimensions, and then after that I didn't really need to make a lot of these, but I did. And then that's when I started building. Originally when I started building, I didn't have a table saw. And so I did this first part all without any table saws, just a straight edge and my circular saw, and it took forever because every time you make a cut you have to make sure it's square. That's what I'm doing right now, because the first couple of cuts I made weren't really square and it really messes you up. So every time I made a cut, you have to set your fence correctly, and then you have to make sure nothing moves when you're pushing it. Anyways, here I'm cutting out the middle. Luckily the middle didn't have to be square. It was just a cut out to get rid of material to make it lighter. So every time I'm doing this in the middle, it's a part that's not seen, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, I had to make 8 of those. And then I went to my brother-in-law and I asked him to borrow his table saw, because I figured there was no way that I was going to finish this without a table saw. So he was very kind enough to lend me this one, and this is a really good saw. I highly recommend this saw if you are looking for one it's probably the best contractor saw on the market, for sure. Mostly because it has I really like the arbor, and sucker just cuts everything that I gave it. And for his kindness, I'm giving him, he gets a new blade for it because he let me borrow this. And that's the least I can do, because this really, having a table saw really sped up this work. And then I made this sled that is it's able to cut, do cross cuts real easily and make really good 90-degree cross cuts. It's not the best sled. I could probably done better, but it works, so I keep using it. And I made it out of scrap wood. So here I'm just cutting my cross pieces to go onto those, the middle webs, what I call them. So here I am, and everything I'm laminating them together is what I'm thinking. So I used lots of glue, but I don't have a lot of clamps, so I just use brad nails to keep them together. And that's pretty much as much glue as possible. And see, here I'm scraping off the glue from my previous what I used the wood for before the old project. So every time you see me scraping, I'm scraping off glue and stuff off of the old wood, because it's repurposed, not brand new. And then here I stacked them up, trying to get them to dry straight, because there was older wood, it was a little bit warped, and I needed big pieces and long pieces. So here I'm just cutting more down. I definitely need an outfeed table that's the right height, because not having it at that long cut at the end is really hard to keep it straight through the saw. But I managed, probably more dangerously than it needed to be. I really need to I have a radial arm saw I need to get up and running for those big long cross cuts. Here my son's helping me cut these long pieces. It's also good to have a son that helps. So now I'm just putting more, this is for the drawer slides to have a flush surface. And some of them, half of these webs needed these drawer slides on both sides, and then in the other half only needed them on one side. And then I'm stacking them up to, again, make them dry straight, hopefully. And then I have to do cuts. A lot of the pieces needed notches. Not a lot of them, but some of them did. And then this is the back of one of the halves, and it's trying to make it as light as possible. So I do what I did with the webs, where I cut out cut out a big oval kind of shape. Here I needed, since I basically one for each drawer section. Then I'm using the paint can for my radius marks. And this is all freehand. It doesn't have to be perfect when you do these inside ones, just because one, nobody's going to see them, and so I just tried to follow the lines as best possible, but it wasn't super critical, so it wasn't a perfect job. And my jigsaw is actually my grandfather. He used to work for Black & Decker, and he probably had a bunch of these jigsaws in his garage when he died. They were probably built in the 50s. There's the back. Anyways, I got 2 of my grandfather's jigsaws built in the 1950s Black & Decker. It still works. I got it was brand new in the box when I got them, just 1950s. So here I'm cutting notches in these cross members, and I figured the table saw might be the best way to do a depth instead of the jigsaw, at least for these parts. I still have to use the jigsaw for the back end. So now it's assembly time. Again, I'm just making 1/2 and glue and staples. So now I'm using these like 2-inch long staples. I try to use the staples as much as possible, just because they hold better than just a normal brad nail, either an 18 or a 16 gauge. I think the staples are like 16, but they because there's 2 of them and they just hold better. So I like to use them as much as possible, and I have a whole lot of them. But if you can see them, like if whatever basically I only use them where you wouldn't be able to see it. It's hidden underneath or in somewhere. But they're definitely structural. I tried not to use any nails, actually, or not nails, screws. I didn't use any screws so far, other than putting drawer slides on. Just glue and brad nails or glue and staples. Here I'm marking and scraping glue off this old piece that I reused, and then put a lot of glue. Everything's plywood, so I'm not really concerned about wood movement, so I just glued everything together as much as I could, not really worrying about wood movement. I guess I'll find out if that works out or not. But so far, all this plywood is reused. I didn't have to buy. I did have to buy the webbing, the 1/2-inch center part. It was all construction grade plywood that I bought just to save money. And since nobody's gonna see it, it's buried in the middle. It didn't have to be smooth. Again, just trying to laminate as much as I can pieces of wood together to build up their thicknesses to give them more strength. And then here I pretty much used almost every clamp I have, which just shows you that I don't have very many clamps. And these are the notched pieces that you saw me notch out earlier. And more staples. I bought this piece, so this is a new piece, but it is construction grade. It's a little bit less than 3/4 of an inch. It's not a full 3/4, but it is construction grade. It's not smooth or sanded, which really cuts down on your price. But again, it's, you know, it's what the mattress sits on, so nobody sees it. It's buried underneath. So this gap that you see is there for a reason. At first I didn't think about it, but as I was building it, I decided to make a gap there, and it's the back of the drawers. And I'll show you later, but essentially the idea is that I can hide something underneath my bed, kind of in a hidden space underneath the drawers. That's what it's there for. So now I'm doing the face frame. This wood is brand new, and it's like the nicer pine. It's the finished pine, I guess. There's no knots in it. And so I'm cutting the face frame out, and I'm using pocket holes. You'll see me use pocket holes later for putting these together. I'm not really a big fan of pocket holes for what most people use them for, but I think that face frame, which is not structural, is probably the best use of pocket holes, and it's one of the few things that pocket holes are made for. So I do have this small pocket hole drill jig. That's all I have, and these are pretty much the only place I put pocket holes in this whole thing, because I really don't like them as far as structure goes, so I try to use them as little as possible. I really don't think that they're a good solution for a lot of things that people use them for. But this is their application that I think they're good for. If you do it right, they make a really good, nice joint for your face frame. And then I just glue it right on, and then tack it down. Because you're going to see this frame, I use brad nails, 18 gauge brad nails, no staples. And then where I can, I just clamp it together with every single clamp that I have. Or a big, heavy 45-pound weight. I found that I need to get more weights to use as weights. So after that, this is the actual part, the part that I did any sanding on. Up until this point, I hadn't sanded anything much. But here, you know, this is the face that everybody sees. The only part that you see is this one surface. So here I'm routing the corner, the edge that is the top. And so I don't, you know, you can hit your leg on it, or I have kids, so I routed it with a 1/4 inch round over bit, put a nice fillet on there, and then sanded some more. Lots of sanding. Then my wife came, and she's really good at putting down stain. Plus, you know, it's what she likes, and that's kind of important. So she's the one that puts the stain down. I'm helping her rub it out. And my daughter is trying to make as big a mess as possible with all the sawdust on the floor. She was just throwing it in her hair and stuff to be a 4-year-old again. And then I put polyurethane on it. One thing I noticed is that when I was sanding, I didn't sand enough, and I didn't get enough of the glue squeeze out off. And so anywhere that the glue was, the stain didn't take. So just think about that when you're staining anything, to make sure you sand all the glue off. But just put a coat of, I put 2 coats of this polyurethane. It's not a floor, so I don't think 3 is necessary. And then this just showing you that you can pick it up easily as we take it up and put it in our bedroom. We finished. I put this in my bedroom before we finished the rest of the bed because we're just tired of sleeping on the floor. And my kids are crazy. 16-year-old son. Thanks everybody for watching, and make sure you watch the rest of the series.